Chapter 21 of Deliver Me from Eva by Paul Bailey. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Ben Tucker. Chapter 21. My systematic search of the house went unavailing. Ava's pink satin nightgown had been carefully laid across the bed. Her gay boudoir slippers were nestling on the floor alongside. Apparently she had dressed herself, but she was gone, and nowhere was she to be found in the dark silence of Thalamus. I switched on lights. I called her name through every room, and Margot's disappearance too proved fully as baffling. Gardens and grounds remained the next possibility, and they were dreaded places for me to go. To Thalamus itself I felt a definite and positive bond of attraction. There was psychic appeal and calming influence in all its component parts, but for me only gloom and boding terror filled the wooded acres surrounding it. Courage it took to broach those lurking horrors. I gave Ava's quarters a final search, stepped out to the flagstoned terrace, and circled the house. With every garden bench and chair shining empty under the April moon, I realized I must either broaden my quest or enlist help. Back inside Thalamus, I took the gun from my desk drawer and pocketed it. A rummage of the guest hall closet availed me a 3-celled flashlight. Armed with these very definite morale boosters, I immediately returned to the task of thoroughly combing the estate for the missing girl. I followed the main drive past the road juncture, almost to the very gates themselves. Vivid in my mind as ever was recollection of another night, and its bolt for freedom, and the strange way it had terminated no longer seemed strange to me. I sensed no further desire to flee. Not for anything in the world would I this night have marched past the gates to the high road. I wanted only Ava. I wanted only Thalamus, and a few words of lucid conversation with the woman I loved, before the dreaded storm broke about our shoulders. My retreating steps brought me back to the juncture, and rather than retrace the lonely path directly to Thalamus, I broadened my search by swinging right, toward the cradle of light. On this new and unfamiliar path I was jumpy, nervous, and played the light frequently and thoroughly into every curve and shadowed nook. Sooner than I had anticipated, the great house quite suddenly loomed before me, a huge dark silhouette, clutched like a rich and evil talisman in the fingered blackness of its trees. The pulsing metallic grind of the crickets and the fluted calls of mockingbirds grew in measure with every step nearer the deserted mansion. My heart was thumping furiously, and fear spasms were in my breath as I ascended the wide stone steps of its outer terrace. I played the light with frequency and tightly hugged the gun in my coat pocket. "Ava!" I called, as much to bolster flagging courage as to reveal the presence of my absent bride. "Ava!" But only the mockingbirds and crickets voiced answer, and no probe of the flashlight's beams discovered the missing one within my circuit of the mansion. I had not yet expected to enter, but the great front door yielded at my touch, and I warily stepped inside. My flashlight's bright finger soon pointed out a switch, and quickly the outer hall was alight. It seemed only natural to expect Castleman to step out and obsequiously reach for my hat and coat. But Castleman was dead, along with the other bizarre tenants of this house. I wore my hat and kept my coat as I continued on into the great hall and library. In the overwrought condition of my nerves and the general strangeness of my frame of mind, I sensed the very presence of the ghosts of the departed. My back prickled with fright, and my ears were sensitive to every wraith-like sound as timidly I groped my way through the deserted rooms from whence had come some of life's astonishing moments. "Ava!" I called, and my voice grew tight with hysterious falsetto. "Ava!" But no sound of recognition answered the cry that echoed through the rooms and corridors of the Cradle of Light. If Osmond should have seated himself at the grand piano, if Castleman had silently beckoned me to a chair, or if the doctor himself were voicing mysteries from any one of his leathered pedestals, I could not have felt more in the presence of those who were gone. Mark Allard, co-murderer of the Cradle's genius, was the despised intruder who walked its halls. But I did not want to be there. Ava was the soul for whom I searched, and I wanted no more traffic with the dead. I called her name in one of the atelier's 7 doorways. I gazed in awe at the room and at the table where Dr. Craner had usurped the motivation of my own soul. I glanced at the tiled floor, where at his command I had sponged away the spots of human blood. My bride was not there, and I backed out into the hall. With one last screeching cry of, "Ava!" my nerves cracked. Sobbing, hysterical, I dashed toward the elevator. After pressing its button, I lived another terror moment while it rose from the lower room from whence the three of us, the legless dwarf, Margot, and myself, had gone from it to the hell we had known. It glided to a stop, and I quickly entered. My hand was shaking as I pressed the next to last button. The cage whirred to a stop at the outer entrance. I had no desire to descend lower. Sliding open the elevator's iron door, I stepped into the concrete rear entrance corridor, overjoyed with the freedom it meant from the cradle of light's ghostly influence. And there, as first thing for my nervous eyes to behold, was the figure of a woman. She was walking toward me. Her gaze was on the floor. She was snugged into a heavy winter coat. Instinctively, I clutched the gun in my coat pocket. My sudden start of fright dissipated, however, when the woman raised her face and returned me a surprised glance. It was Margot. "Did you smell anything?" she asked, as we neared one another. I looked at her in astonishment. "Smell anything?" I repeated. She nodded. "A peculiar odor inside the house?" "Hell, I don't know," I said, wondering if Insa's infirmities could have passed to her mother. "I don't remember smelling anything, nor seeing anything either. What is it you're looking for? The sanctified odor of death?" Her gray eyes looked solemnly at me. "Yes," she whispered, "the odor of death. I'm on my way into the cradle of light, to close up its every vent and window, to seal it up like a tomb." "You mean to lock up the smell with it?" "Tightly, securely." "God," I sighed, and stared incredulously. "Were you looking for me here?" she asked. "I've been looking for Ava and you both, ever since I awakened." "I took another trip on the doctor's tram," she said. "I made another round-trip visit to the cellar, and I plugged up its windows." "Are you crazy? Is it me, or can it be all of us? Why in God's name would you want to visit that ghastly hole, let alone plug up its windows?" "Someone had to." If Margot had gone into one of Inza's frothing fits, it would not have surprised me. But her face was so calm, so unemotional, that I began seriously to doubt my own sanity. "I suppose you found the odor of death there all right?" I said, probing her maliciously. "When I left, a very short time ago, it was gathering like a cloud." With her sudden explosive laugh, I gave up hope. "Where's Ava?" I growled impatiently. "Ava is walking." "Where?" "In the gardens." She snugged deeper into the coat and smiled. "I've searched the gardens. I've walked the road between the two houses. I've gone through the cradle of light." "You'll find Ava on the mockingbird path, as I found her. The cycle is nearing its end. I doubt she'll know you, but don't be alarmed. She's close to the transition." "She'd better be," I grumbled. "When I'm done shutting windows, I'll return to Thalamus to await your pleasure." "My pleasure, Margot?" "You're about to face your moment. How you will act is your own affair. If you run away, our circle is dissolved, and it's goodbye, you and I. If you take Ava, enter her sphere, you'll find deep need of me." "Why?" "Because I know the fundamental secrets." Margot paused and stared intently at the floor. "If you murder Ava, you'll also kill me." "That's foolish talk, Margot." Her gray eyes looked soberly and intently at me. "Is it?" she asked. I laughed, and nervously fumbled for a cigarette. Before I could scratch a match, she'd snatched both match and cigarette from me and cast them to the floor. All I could do was stare like a dumb ox. "The solemn thing I ask," she was saying, "is that in the next few minutes you ponder things carefully. Good night, Mark. You can smoke on the path, and I'll await your decision." Abruptly, she turned from me. In abject wonderment, I watched while Ava's mother stepped into the elevator and vanished from sight. Slowly, I walked down the corridor to the rear entrance and its iron door. I opened it and stepped outside. The door clanked shut behind me. Once more I was in the clear night's air, freed again of mental duress, and at the end of the path and bluff's edge. Below me was the Arroyo Seco, and across its darksome gap the twinkling lights of Pasadena. For a moment there came a nostalgic tug for the outer world so oddly lost to me, and so strangely plucked from my consciousness. But the things I had seen, felt, and done just as suddenly clinched their grip again upon me. Once more I heard the pulsing drone of frogs and crickets from the canyon's hollow. With a sense of loss and overwhelming sadness, I started along the path in search of my woman. And again the jasmine was thick upon the air, and I wondered vaguely if it could be the scent of death. Again the mocking birds ran the scales of their flute-like virtuosity, while a lonely and unhappy man stumbled his way along the narrow twisting path toward Thalamus. I called Ava's name, but only the ghostly night birds paused to listen, and gradually into my conscious thought there began to seep an unutterable fear that I had lost Ava, that no more was I to possess the woman who had come to mean my very life. I thought of Margot, her acts, and strange predictions. I thought of every experience, suffered or enjoyed, since I had met my bride of beauty. For a love overwhelming, mysterious, and sensually exciting, I had committed myself to a perversely different pattern of life, and had sacrificed my identity in the world of men. But in the barter for Ava Craner I felt I had lost nothing. It was not unknown to me that the line between sanity and madness is delicately drawn, and few are qualified to precisely say where one begins and the other leaves off. I had passed through the cradle of light, and the house had been full of the invisible dead. I knew their voices, but I could not comprehend their words. I sensed their presence, but I could not see their faces. I could not smell them, as apparently did Margot, but they walked with the woman who was mine. They violated and sullied my nuptial bed. They had stolen my bride from my arms and had shut off her vision from me. Like a creature forgotten, I walked the night path alone. I had come to her a man of sober understanding and normal intelligence. Whether the accomplishments and discoveries of Dr. Craner had resulted from expansion of a superior intellect or an alliance with hell, these things I could not say, and the fleshly voice of the legless physician had been silenced by the fire that had consumed him. Now it was my turn to save myself, or be consumed, and voices I could not hear laughed out of faces I could not see. How I was to deliver myself from these things was not at the moment known to me, but earlier in the day I had scribed some thoughts on paper, and in my moment's pause before the greater decision, I resolved myself to testify for all men to read. For I had seen wonders performed with the human head. I had known a man who, by the simple manipulation of the plates of the skull, could expand the mental faculties of humanity to encompass all things, known and unknown, and whose evolved technique and trained hands could well have been man's bridge into mystery and the key to eternity's realm. Even though the gun in my pocket should kill the incarnate flower of this wonder, I still was anxious to plead that the secret of the cradle of light be probed and nurtured, that its evils might be conquered and its good made known. Solemnly I believed the mysterious function of thought had been on the verge of unfoldment, that the cranial processes, from little-known glands to the outermost psychic and spiritual phenomena, might yet be one man's gift to a blind and groping world, even though events and influences had conspired to cut it short. And then Margot's words came sharply back to me. I, Mark Allard, could step into the breach, partake of the fruit, and become as the great departed. The source flow was still preserved, the secrets anxiously ready to be made known, and the decision solely in my own hands. And thinking of myself as king, the night quite suddenly grew less foreboding. I wished then that I might have had Osmond's superior thought processes transferred to me. I wished that the doctor's skilled hands might have lifted the obstructive limitations of bone and tissue from my brain, that intellectually I might have expanded to the stature of the magnificent creature to which I had mated. Could the blinds thus have been removed from my eyes and intellect, I might better have coped with the problems that were so imminently near to destroying us both. For here in the Pasadena hills, was either a quickening answer to a lost and groping world, or the blackest, most destructive scourge of hell. Abjectly and deeply fearful, I walked toward the answer. And then, in a turn of the path, in a wooded nook where the jasmine scent was deepest, I saw my bride, gowned in white, chokingly lovely in the ethereal light of the moon. Eva stood in the little wooded clearing ahead. Her back was to me, and she was peering ahead in motionless expectancy. I stopped for my eyes to feast. I made a step toward her, and stopped again. She was speaking.
"You may go now, Osman," she was saying. "My beloved is here."
My spine prickled. It was an eerie moment. I waited for her to turn and give herself to me. Instead, she started forward. In the voice of vibrant endurance I knew so well, I heard her joy moans. I watched while she disappeared around the turn of the path. I remembered Insa as the froth of madness bubbled from my lips. I remembered Margot as sorrow and hate forced the decision. I had drawn the gun from my pocket, and it glittered now in the moonlight. Destiny for me lay ahead on this path. "You will escape. You will kill. Or you will conform," came the blazing words of the prophecy. Slowly, I stalked my bride toward Thalamus. End of chapter 21.